President Donald Trump has just declared that the United States has destroyed 100% of Iran's military capability. Yet the world's #1 naval power is now publicly calling for help from China, France, the United Kingdom, and other allies to send warships to rescue the Strait of Hormuz. So what is really happening that makes the powerful United States unable to handle a narrow strait on its own? Welcome back to New Era, the place where we break down and examine the most complex movements shaping the world. But today, that we will analyze one of the paradoxes of modern warfare. Having the power to bomb does not necessarily mean having the capability to protect. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the latest analyses of the global geopolitical chessboard. And before we begin, I want to hear your opinion. Is the United States pretending to be weak to force its allies to reveal their positions? In your view, is this a military stalemate or a strategic economic move by Washington? Leave your thoughts in the comments right now. Before we dive deeper into the analysis, let's first look at the broader context. The Strait of Hormuz is the lifeline of the global economy, carrying nearly 20% of the world's seaborne oil and 1/3 of global fertilizer shipments. Right now, this route has effectively fallen into paralysis. Shipping traffic has dropped by as much as 97%. This disruption is not merely a regional crisis, it is sending shockwaves through energy and food supply chains across the entire world. Looking back at the rapid chain of developments in mid-March 2026, early March 2026, the conflict erupts, and the United States launches airstrikes on Iran's Karg Island. However, Washington carefully targets only military facilities such as runways, while avoiding oil infrastructure in order to prevent a shock to global energy markets. March 13th, 2026, satellite intelligence imagery reveals an unprecedented scene. Roughly 400 commercial ships anchored and waiting in the Gulf of Oman, with no one daring to cross the strait. March 14th, 2026. A historic milestone occurs when the number of ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz officially drops to 0. On the same day, Iran delivers a sharp blow, using drones to strike the Fujairah oil transshipment terminal in the UAE, located outside the Strait of Hormuz, causing fires and halting loading operations. March 15th, 2026. President Trump posts on Truth Social, officially calling on the United Kingdom, France, Japan, South Korea, and even rival China to deploy warships to the region. So why is the US fleet unable to resolve the situation alone and forced to seek help from both allies and competitors? There are 3 core reasons. First, the destructive logic of asymmetric warfare. President Trump himself admitted a bitter reality. Even if Iran's conventional military forces are crippled, in a narrow strait, Iran only needs to deploy a few naval mines, operate several drones, or launch a short-range missile to create a deadly threat. In reality, the US Navy still has many warships in the region, yet even they are reluctant to escort oil tankers through such a confined and dangerous waterway. Second, Iran's strategy of selective blockade. Iran has not imposed a full blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that the strait remains open to everyone except ships belonging to the United States and Israel. As Araghchi said in an interview with Al Jazeera, the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is only closed to the tankers and ships belonging to our enemies, to those who are attacking us and their allies. Others are free to pass. Maritime tracking data confirms this claim. Several ships from Pakistan and Turkey have been allowed to pass normally after requesting permission. Third, hesitation among close allies. Sending warships to Hormuz right now effectively means entering a direct confrontation with Iran, something many countries are reluctant to do. Although the United States has issued its call for assistance, the responses from both France and China have been extremely cautious, and in some cases openly reluctant. France, refusal to intervene immediately. French Defense Minister Catherine Vautrin stated that France will not send warships to the Strait of Hormuz while the conflict continues to escalate. France maintains a purely defensive posture, and has no plan to move the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle from the eastern Mediterranean to participate in the US campaign. President Emmanuel Macron has reinforced France's doctrine of strategic autonomy during a visit to a military base in Cyprus on March 9th. On 2026, Macron stated that France would only lead a purely defensive escort mission with EU and international partners to protect commercial shipping. Paris has also made clear that such a mission would only begin once the most intense phase of the conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran has ended, by deploying the Charles de Gaulle carrier group and 8 warships to the eastern Mediterranean, while staying distant from US airstrikes. France is sending a clear message. Paris is willing to support global energy security, but will not become a shield in a full-scale war it did not start. China. Beijing has offered no military commitment whatsoever. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington only issued a general statement that all parties share responsibility for ensuring stable energy supplies, and called for tensions to be reduced through diplomacy. In reality, Chinese oil tankers are still allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz on a limited basis due to the strategic partnership between Beijing and Tehran. As a result, China has little incentive to join a US-led military coalition that could damage its relationship with Iran. Why? So the answer to why the United States cannot keep the strait open without China and France becomes clear. The United States may possess overwhelming bombing power, but China holds the economic leverage capable of influencing Iran, and France provides the international legitimacy for a naval escort mission. Without these two pieces, Washington faces not only a military deadlock, but also a diplomatic failure. Beyond France and China, the US call for assistance has received very different responses from other countries, ranging from extreme caution among close allies to independent strategies by regional powers. United Kingdom. Britain finds itself in a strategic dilemma. It wants to preserve its special alliance with the United States, yet fears being drawn into a costly war. According to the Mirror and the Guardian, instead of sending large warships into the danger zone, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband stated that the UK is considering deploying mine-hunting drones. This represents a middle ground solution, allowing Britain to contribute to maritime security while minimizing risks to sailors and avoiding direct escalation with Iran, Japan, and South Korea, and despite relying on the Strait of Hormuz for 70 to 90% of their oil supplies. Both East Asian powers remain extremely cautious. According to NHK, representatives of Japan's ruling party say the legal and operational barriers to deploying warships into combat are extremely high. Tokyo fears that joining the US coalition could damage its long-standing diplomatic relationship with Tehran. Seoul says it is carefully reviewing the situation, but in practice prefers indirect protective measures rather than sending forces. According to Chosun Ilbo, South Korea is considering operating independently rather than joining the US-led coalition in order to avoid provoking Iran. Germany has delivered one of the firmest responses within the European Union. German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul stated on ARD March 15, 2026, that Germany will not become part of this conflict. Berlin believes the only solution for the Strait of Hormuz is diplomatic negotiation with Iran, and not an increase in military presence. The United States now faces a harsh reality. European allies such as Germany and France prioritize diplomacy. Asian partners such as Japan and South Korea fear the risks. Meanwhile, emerging powers such as India and China are quietly negotiating their own arrangements with Iran to protect their shipping. So what happens if the Hormuz deadlock cannot be resolved? The world will pay an extremely heavy price. Energy markets. Brent crude prices have surged 27%, went from $65 to over $90 per barrel. Natural gas prices have jumped 74%. Shipping costs. War risk insurance for a single voyage has risen 300%, from $250,000 to nearly $1 million. Freight rates for dirty tankers carrying crude oil have increased 54%. Rates for clean tankers transporting refined fuels have surged 72%, and as ships are forced to detour around the Cape of Good Hope. Food security. Remember, 1/3 of global fertilizer shipments pass through this strait. When natural gas prices rise, fertilizer prices rise. And that creates the risk of a global food price crisis that could hit developing countries especially hard. In the United Kingdom, some households are already facing a painful choice between heating their homes or filling their stomachs, as heating oil prices have nearly tripled. So in the end, the story of the Strait of Hormuz is not just a confrontation between warships. It is a brutal geopolitical game. Military power may be able to flatten a country, but it may still be unable to secure a narrow shipping lane. Washington now faces a superpower paradox. The United States may have enough missiles to strike Iran, but it cannot guarantee the safety of a single oil tanker against cheap naval mines without help from rivals like China, or hesitant allies such as France and the United Kingdom. If a diplomatic solution does not emerge soon, the cost will not remain confined to the Middle East. It will reach directly into the pockets of every household, through rising energy prices and consumer goods. Now it's your turn. Can President Trump persuade allies to share the burden, or will the United States be forced to accept a strategic setback at this critical economic choke point? And can China continue to play the role of the outsider benefiting from the situation? What do you think about this strategic dilemma facing the United States? Will France and the United Kingdom eventually compromise and send warships? Or will China continue to play the role of the patient fisherman waiting for the catch? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to New Era so we can continue bringing you the most in-depth geopolitical analysis.